This is a simple worksheet based on exponents. So watch very closely, and you'll be able to figure this out. The rules of exponents are pretty easy, okay? Two that are being stressed here is if you multiply one by the other, and I'll give you an example how this would look. Let's put this here. If I have x to the 5th times x to the 3rd, I just add exponents. It'd be x to the 8th. That's if you're multiplying. Let's say if it's x to the minus 5 times x to the 3rd, your answer would be x to the minus 2, okay? All right. So just keep in mind, you're just adding. If you're dividing, let's say I have x to the 5 divided by x to the 3, you would subtract exponents, and you just get like x to the 2. You can also have it like this, x to the 5 over x to the 3. You subtract the exponents, it would just become x to the 2, okay? Also, as a review, keep in mind that if something says x to the minus 2, that's going to be equivalent to 1 over x squared. That means you put it underneath a denominator, right? So if you watching some of these things, sometimes you can have this, x to the minus 5 over x to the minus 2. You might not, well, how do I do this? Well, there's a couple ways you can do a problem like this. One of them is just put x to the 2 on top and x to the 5 underneath, okay? And if you were to work it out, you would have 1 over x to the 3, okay? Another way you can do this, and keep in mind, if you wanted to pull this thing up, you would have to make it x to the minus 3. If you want to pull it out from underneath that 1. Another way you can write that is x to the minus 5 minus, if we're going to divide it, I put it here. But this becomes minus 2 equals, keep in mind it says minus 2, makes this whole thing a plus the x to the minus 3, which makes these the same. All right, so let's look at a couple of these problems. Now I've gone through a whole bunch of fun stuff here. This should be interesting to see what this thing's going to look like. All right, let's start with the first one. It says minus x times 10 to the minus 5 times minus 5 times 10 to the 15. You basically just add the exponents. You end up with, oh, I almost put an x. You would make this thing minus 5 times to the 5th, right? Minus 10 plus 15 ends up being there. I'm going to jump through these. These are a bunch of practice for doing a lot of these things. I'm going to do one that has a division in it so you can get a better idea what's going on. Okay, so I'm going to scroll this down for a second, and let's look for one that's a little more interesting. This right here is one where you have to try to guess what that first number was. In this case, we have x to the x, 10 to the x, and this is 10 to the minus 9, but you're supposed to end up with an 11. The only way you could possibly do that is that if this was a 20, if this was 10 to the 20 times 10 to the minus 9, you would end up with 10 to the 11, okay? And that's probably the easiest way to do it. So that's how you would figure that one out. Same thing here. You got to think, how would I get here? What would I have added to the thing? And check it, this one, if you blow it up, take a closer look. This is where it might be a little tricky. That says minus x. Ooh. So keep in mind, whatever this is has to be inverted. So that's a little tricky, right? Maybe we should take a look at that very carefully. This is 10 to the minus 10. This is 10 to the minus 15. What would this have been if it was minus 5? Okay, I'm going to write the rest of it so you make sure you understand what I'm saying. If it's negative 8 over 7 to the minus 5, right, the x of that would have made that minus 8 over 7 to the plus 5 if it's to the opposite of it. So keep that in mind, okay? With that, hopefully you can work through the rest of these and it kind of makes sense. You're just trying to find who this guy is in order to make this happen.